Well, good early Friday morning, YouTube family out there. I'm just about 10,000 subscribers. I can't believe that. So thank you guys so much for subscribing. I'm not one to be like, hey, make sure you subscribe. So the fact that you did it on your own accord, outstanding. All right, today I thought it'd be fun to kind of look at 8 flaws of the C5 Corvette from the factory that GM knew about, and they were just like, yeah, we're gonna let it ride, not worry about it. About a year ago, I did a video on, I think it was like 10 things that you're gonna run into on the C5 Corvette as far as ownership, things that are gonna happen. Most of those were just things that could kind of happen to any car, but more common issues, if you will. And this is just things that they knew about with the platform, and they were just like, you know what, it is what it is. And I mean, I know the platform is 20 years old, but it's still kind of fun just to talk about, to see if you have any of these issues as well. I've had quite a few of these on this list. I think most of them are rectified though before I bought the car. So let's do a little intro and we'll get into it. All right, my front night drive headlights should be here Monday. I'm so excited. And then we're gonna do some bushings all the way around all 4 corners and all the suspension. So look for that coming down the pipeline in the next couple weeks. All right, now 8 things here, no particular order. We'll go ahead and start with number 1. Number 1 is the seats. Now you're thinking the seats are trash. Yeah, I know. But there was a flaw in the seat design where there's a little, what do you call it? Like a little washer, if you will, that over time, it just kind of wore itself down. And it would create a little 1/8 inch gap over time and get wider and wider. Long story short, whenever you accelerated or brake too fast, you kind of do this motion and it got a nice little click going. And when I first picked up this car, it was really gnarly. Now there is a really good video on YouTube. If I remember, I'll put it in the description below on how to fix it. It's very simple. It's a couple little new washers. You got to kind of file them down a little bit. You got to take it kind of apart. It's kind of involved, not impossible. Pretty cheap fix. Now, my advice, just get new seats. The seats, in my opinion, are trash. I know people out there love them, but if you like cornering, you're gonna fall out. There was no bolstering in them. The leather was, I guess leather. I don't know what you call it. It felt more like plastic, but was not a fan of the stock C5 seats. The C6 has got a little better, and by the C7, amazing OE seats, and the C8s are just phenomenal, especially in the GT2. Yeah, number 1. All right, number 2 is something that I have not experienced, but I see it almost every day in Corvette forums and YouTube videos and people asking me, and that is the sticky clutch pedal, especially at high revving shifts. Now, when I bought my car, it had a newer clutch. I think it was the same OE clutch. I just took it apart a few weeks ago, a couple months ago. Looks like it has a new slave cylinder in this guy, and they put a remote bleeder in. I put a tick master in right away, obviously flush all the fluids. I have not had the issue, but it is very common. And the most frustrating part is that there's no real one fix for it. A lot of people say it comes from the high heat, especially when you're putting out a lot of power at high revs. Some say it's a slight clutch slipping. Like I said, some say it's due to the very high RPM shifts. Some say it's the actual return spring. It's not really a return spring, it's more of a helper spring down below and by your feet. Contaminated clutch fluid. Now, for whatever reason, the clutch system in the C5, it just absorbs dirt. These things get dirty so quick. I did a complete flush and probably got about 1,200 miles, and this thing is already filthy, the clutch fluid. So Ranger method's good if you don't have a clutch bleeder, remote bleeder, but if you don't, it's almost impossible to get to. You can get to it, but you got to remove a lot of shit underneath as far as your exhaust. You got to reach over your bell housing. It's just a pain. So, I mean, that in itself is kind of a flaw, not having a remote bleed accessible. But yeah, these things, the clutch system just loves debris and dirt. Some people say it's caused by clutch fluid getting past the seal in the slave cylinder. Other people say it's the over travel of the throw out bearing. Some say there's too much restriction in the stock hose setup with the master cylinder, or just the master cylinder itself to blame. Now, my personal opinion is, looking at forums, I noticed people that do a wrap on their exhaust to lower the heat and a tick master cylinder with a really good flush typically fixes the problem. Is that the root? I don't know. It's something that GM's known about since, I want to say 99. It's been an issue, and they never rectified it. By the C6 06, they pretty much got it rectified. My C6 and C7 never did it, and they were in stock form. So it's kind of one of those things that's kind of interesting to speculate about. GM knew about it, and they were just like, yeah, whatever. It is what it is. So if you look on forums, this problem goes back to right in the middle of the C5 production. All right, number 3, the fuel sending units. I would say 80% of these cars have this issue, especially if you're using lower tier gas. When I first picked this up, I had the issue as well. And I did a video on this about a year ago on how to rectify it and why it does it. Long story short, the fuel sending unit, it gets sulfur buildup from low tier gas, and it takes a couple years for it to happen. A lot of people will say, well, I'm not using the Techron method. I'm just going to replace my fuel sending unit, and it's great. It'll last a couple years until they're using, you know, shitty tier gas, and then it comes right back. The way the little sensor deal with the float, the way it's designed, it's just a piss poor design. And I want to say the early model of the C6 also had the issue. In late 2003 and 2004, they did overhaul the fuel delivery system on the C5, the pump, and if I'm not mistaken, the fuel sending unit as well is on the passenger side instead of the driver's side. Now, if you want to replace the fuel sending unit on a 99, I believe, or 2003 early, it's super easy. You remove the back rear wheel. You have a little plate right there covering the gas tank. 3 bolts, I want to say, under your hoses. It comes out, put a new one in, put it back in. And you can even clean it that way too if you wanted to. I have found running Techron fix the problem right up. I think I did it once when I first got the car. I was on a long road trip. The problem came back. I put some Chevron gas in it with another bottle of Techron. Problem's gone. Again, that's something that GM knew about halfway through the C5 platform, and they just didn't fix it. Number 4, the oil pressure sending units. I know my car's had it fixed, because I'll show you in a second under the cowl where someone cut it. I'll take you to the car right now and show you all 3 ways you can remedy this. All right, over here at the engine here. Now there's 3 ways to remedy a broken fuel sending unit. One is the correct way, which is actually removing the entire intake plenum, which honestly is not that bad. You just take it off, torque back to spec. You can get to it just easily. It's right back here. Another method people have said is that if you use an extension with some angled, like U-joint type sockets, you can reach it. I've never seen it done, but in theory, I guess you could. And lastly is a lot of people simply cut a hole, so you can see it right there. Like someone that had my car before me, that's what they did, like a little sawzall or something, I'm not really sure. And you take the cowl off right here, and you can get a wrench straight down and replace it that way. And a lot of people will do a remote sensor. You guess you just plug it in, and the sensor kind of hangs out over here somewhere, because these things fail so often. It makes it a lot easier. That is another option as well. All right, number 5. I'm not sure if this is unique to the C5 platform, but I'll be damned if I don't see this issue coming up almost daily in a forum or question. That is the Wobbly harmonic balancer up front of your block that connects to your camshaft and all your goodies on your accessories. This is one of those things. It's not a huge issue, and if you see it's hard to wobble, simply swap it out. A lot of people don't like to swap it out because you got to remove a lot of the steering components, and it makes people nervous to do that. It's really not that hard of a job. One of the biggest things is breaking the torque on the harmonic balancer, and after that, simply putting it back on all your accessories. And I will say this: if you do have your balancer off, change your oil pump because it's right there. And if you want to do a cam job as well, that's the time to do it. But not a huge issue, but I see that a lot. Harmonic balancer issues. A lot of people post, is it fucked up? Is this wrong? And it's fine. And some are really messed up, you can tell, but a lot of them have a little bit to them. And I mean, any harmonic balancer, you're going to see, if you look close enough, hard enough, a little bit of a wobble. It's just the nature of how it is. But you can tell when they're bad. They're pretty gnarly, but most of the time they're fine. I think it's more of a anxiety type issue, if anything. But yeah, I see the harmonic balancer issue come up quite a bit. Number 6, the rear axle nuts tend to loosen themselves. Now, I forget which side's worse because torque, spinning, and motion. I want to say it's the passenger side has more of a tendency to unseat itself and back itself out. People will think your wheel is going to fall off. It's not. It's held on by your hub. But it will cause a unique sensation and a noise. It's easy to test. Just get a torque wrench and torque it back to 118 foot-pounds, and you're all set. Also use some Loctite as well, and then you're all set. Number 7 is an issue I've never dealt with simply because I don't have a convertible. But I have seen this a lot on the convertibles. The rear glass simply just falls out. There's little safety, what do you call them? Like elastic bands that'll keep it in place from completely falling out. Most of the fixes I've seen that people that do have this is Gorilla Glue. But I think there's a better way to do it. Again, I'm not a convertible owner, so I've never really dove too deep into this issue, but it is a common issue for the C5 owners with a convertible. GM knew about it. They didn't give a shit. My opinion, get a coupe or a Z. And last but not least is the rear end leaking. This is very unique because where the differential mounts to the transmission, there's no conventional type gasket. It's just an RTV sealant that you gotta have. You got to put on just right. If you don't, you will get what's called leaky butt syndrome, and you will see fluid leaking right where it meets. Knock on wood, since I bought mine. Looks like whoever did mine did a good job. No leaks whatsoever. But yeah, it's just interesting where the two main components meet. There's no real proprietary gasket. It's just a sealant that you just kind of put on there, slap it together, hope for the best. And again, that's something that GM designed. They thought it was a good idea. And I want to say that, oh, don't quote me, I didn't do any research on this, but I think the C6 does rectify it. If not, someone in the comments will be like, you're an idiot, and they did. So I apologize ahead of time. All right, guys, that's all I got for 8 factory flaws for the C5 Corvette. Hope you guys found this informative, learned something out of it. I learned a couple of things doing this, actually. So, all right, guys, I'm going to go edit this and go to bed. I'm exhausted, and hopefully I'll see you guys in a couple of days for a 10,000 subscriber video. And the night drive, headlights coming up, and then the bushings, and it never ends, you know? All right, guys, go enjoy your weekend, and I'll catch you guys next time. Mark out.